welcome or welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another reading vlog, specifically another reading vlog for Around the World in Books. Around the World in Books is a series of reading vlogs in which I'm going to be reading books by different authors in different countries around the world. I mainly read books by American authors and sometimes Canadian authors, and I feel like challenging myself in this way to find books that are by authors not specifically from those countries. It'll kind of naturally allow me to diversify my reading as a whole. In this reading vlog, we're going to be focusing on two authors from the same country, and that country is Sweden. The first author that I'm going to be reading a book from is very popular in the booktube community already, and that author is Fredrik. I was originally going to read Beartown by Fredrik for this video because I've had that book on my shelf for at least 6 months now, I want to say. But for some reason, I just couldn't bring myself to read Beartown until I read Anxious People. I just feel like that makes more sense to me, especially because Beartown is a series and this book is a standalone. The way I've heard this book being described is it's a failed bank robbery gone wrong, in which the failed bank robber barges into an open house. There's a realtor and I think 7 or 8 other people looking at the open house, and he holds them all hostage at gunpoint. And I think you get the point of view of each of the people that are held hostage in the situation, and I believe it talks about different aspects of life. I've heard Fredrik Backman's writing is very witty and funny one moment, and then it is heart-wrenching the next. I'm very intrigued to see what this book is like. I've already read like 10 pages of this book, and so far from what I've seen, I'm already enjoying his writing style. I feel like the first page of this book was already pretty captivating to me, so I'm very excited to finally get to a Fredrik Backman book because I've heard so many good things and I've wanted to read his books for so long, and I just never did for some reason. But Fredrik Backman has written numerous novels, mostly fiction and I think one non-fiction, and he currently lives in Stockholm, Sweden. This next book, I actually have no idea what it's about. Even reading the synopsis, I don't fully understand the concept of it, but it's literary fiction. I first heard about it from Jack Edwards. He had raved about this book and he said that he's never had a book where he annotated it more, and I love annotating physical books. So when I heard that, it was immediately added to my TBR, and that book is The Details by Genberg. So I'm not fully sure what this book is about, but it is very short. It is a literary fiction with a sapphic relationship in it, I believe. And I don't often read books that are on the Booker List Prize. I would say more on the BookTok side of the internet versus like the Litfic side of the internet, but I am very excited to read this book. I think it's going to be very beautiful. But yeah, anyway, this is going to be the second book that I'm reading for this video. Annotating so much. I'm only on page 15. I've already annotated a couple of things. I can already tell that I'm going to like Fredrik Backman's writing, and I can already tell that I'm going to like this book. I feel like the setup of it so far and how he is sprinkling in some important topics in a way that feels very natural to be talked about is very interesting. I'm reading a part where an older police officer is talking to a younger police officer, and it's told in third person, like omniscient perspective, and they're kind of just talking about their differences, and the younger police officer seems like frustrated. He's not able to kind of get where he needs to go, but he's not really asking for help. And later it kind of switches perspectives to the older man, and he says, when the younger officer has gone, the older man sits alone in the staff room drinking his coffee. Older men rarely know what to say to younger men to let them know that they care. It's so hard to find the words when all you really want to say is, I can see you're hurting. I don't know why, but I read that part and I audibly said, aw, that's so sad. I've yet to give an update on my reading since I started reading, so thought it would be a good time to do that now. I'm currently a little over 200 pages into Anxious People by Fredrik Backman, and there's only like 340-ish pages in this book, so pretty close to finishing, and I think I'll probably finish either today or tomorrow. Initial thoughts on this book. I flew through the first like 150 pages of this book, but at the time I was also reading something on my Kindle, so once I read the initial 150 pages, I kind of just stopped reading this book. But now that I finished my Kindle book, I'm going to continue on with Anxious People, and I am really enjoying it so far. I think the setup is really interesting. The book is told in two different formats. One is like regular storytelling, in which you're kind of getting a perspective of each of the people in the apartment, but also you're getting glimpses into their life. And the other part of the storytelling is an interview style with the police officers who are on the case. The police officers are also kind of main characters in this book as well, because they kind of have their own POV, as well as we get glimpses into their life. I think my favorite thing about this book so far is Fredrik Backman's writing. It's super quirky. I love the storytelling, and I feel like the way he's able to make a situation humorous, but then also be talking about very sentimental, deep topics at the same time is interwoven together so well in a way that doesn't feel forced or unnatural in the storytelling. It does explore different types of relationships. There's like romantic relationships in here of an older married couple and then a younger married couple, father and a son who work together. There's a lot of things going on. I'm really enjoying it so far. I've been annotating and also tabbing the book throughout my reading experience, so I'm excited to continue. Finished the book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I can see why it has such high ratings and why people recommend and love this book so much. For me personally, the writing was what stood out to me the most in this book. Anxious People is somehow super unserious yet so deeply moving at the same time. I feel like the characters and the plot line is kind of silly, and the narrator in this book often talks about how all of the hostages and all of the characters in this book are bumbling idiots. And while I was reading this and the plot was unfolding and I was learning more about each of the characters and the way that they were acting, I felt like I was watching a comedy skit of some sort, and I feel like that's kind of how the book was written out. And on the other hand, despite the very comical background of this book, it touches upon so many deeper topics as well. And I would check the trigger warnings for this book. Despite there being heavier topics in this book, I would say the tone of it is still very lighthearted. I feel like he weaves it in a way that doesn't make it seem so heavy. I really enjoyed this book, but I think I would have enjoyed it more had I read it in one sitting or read it in a shorter amount of time. So if you're able to read this book in a sitting or reading it really fast, I would recommend to do so, because I feel like the messaging and the way that the story unfolds would definitely play out better. Despite the synopsis saying like it's a bank robber hostage situation with 8 anxious people stuck in an apartment, it is so much more than that. Yes, there is a bank robber. Yes, it is a hostage situation, but the hostages in the apartment represent a variety of different types of people. People of different ages, people of different socioeconomic statuses, people of different sexual orientations. And it also delves a lot deeper into different types of relationships, whether that be familial relationships, romantic relationships, or friendships. It kind of has an overarching theme of like recognizing that other people have very complex internal problems and complex lives, and you can't really judge them based on how they look, because you don't really know what's going on in their life or what they've been through. And you see that in each of the characters, because in each of their point of views, they kind of talk about their first impressions of everyone in the hostage situation, and then as the story unfolds and they learn more about each other, it's kind of like they each realize that their first impression of them was incorrect, and there's more to it than meets the eye, essentially. I would say you have to read this book in a certain kind of mood. If you're in a more cynical, critical mood, I feel like you wouldn't enjoy this book, because the plot line and the dialogue and some things can be very cheesy, and some of the plot points are very convenient. So I feel like if you're not in the mood to read something like this, then it won't give you the same impact. And I feel like the only reason why this isn't a 5-star book for me right now is because I spaced out my reading, and at the beginning of when I started this book, I was definitely less critical, definitely more in the mood for like this kind of humor, this kind of writing. But then when I finished the book, I was being a bit more critical of it. So because of that, I am a little bit unsure of what I want to rate this book. It's a 5-star 5-star in terms of the writing and the impact that I felt it had on me, but it's not a 5-star in the sense that I had the 5-star feeling. So I'm going to give it the next best thing and say this is 4.75 stars. Next, I'm going to pick up The Details by Genberg. It is such an itty bitty little book. It is only like 130 something pages, I think, so I think it'll be pretty easy to fly through. I don't necessarily know what this book is about, and I haven't started it yet, so once I start, obviously I'll have a better idea of what the book is about. Oh, Fredrik Backman has a quote on it. I didn't even notice. It's currently Saturday today, so I think I'll probably be able to finish this book over the weekend just because it's so short. I did start this book. Not when I said I was going to start it. I said I was going to finish this over the weekend. I didn't even start it during the weekend at all. But I started it yesterday. I only got 32 pages in, but it's a very short book. There's like 140-ish pages in this book or something. So I have about 100 pages left. But this book is essentially a collection of stories from the narrator's life. The first one details the time period when she was with her ex-girlfriend Johanna. I'm currently on chapter 2, which is regarding her friend Nikki, who mysteriously disappeared and went no contact with everyone. There are 2 other stories in here besides those 2. One with Alejandro, who appears like a storm at precisely the right moment, and Bridget, whose elusive qualities mask a painful secret. So essentially, this book is built around 4 personas of people that this narrator has met in her life and has impacted her life in some way, and how those 4 people have shaped her and her personality and where she is now. I've annotated quite a bit. The first story with Johanna, her ex-girlfriend, was actually very interesting, and I really like the way that she wrote the story. So I'm enjoying the writing so far. I'm enjoying the story. There's not like much plot going on. It's more so just like a character study. Overall, I'm enjoying this book. Final book update on The Details by Genberg. I did end up finishing this last night. I haven't been able to come up with a rating for this book because I don't often read lit fic. And I feel like when you don't read enough of a genre, it's kind of hard to rate because you have nothing else to compare it to. As well, when I think about other books that I've read that I rated really highly, it has to do with like character development, how good the plot was, how good the world building is, if it's like a fantasy book, stuff like that. So reading a lit fic where it's essentially just a character study and not much plot happens or anything like that, it makes it kind of hard to rate just because I don't have other books to compare it to or any reference point as to what a good lit fic book would be. This book is split into 4 different parts. Genberg is able to bring it together in such a way that it feels like a cohesive story. And what I find interesting about the way this book was written is that you don't even learn the narrator's name. Like, you have no idea who she is, but you learn about this cast of characters that entered and exited her life at some point and had changed and impacted her personality in some way. And it kind of just makes you realize again that you are really just a mosaic of everyone that you've ever met and befriended or been in a relationship with. The story is written in a way that makes you really think about slowing down and appreciating the details of life and appreciating the people that come in and out of your life. Like I said, I'm kind of having trouble rating this book because I don't read that much literary fiction. I really enjoyed 2 of the stories in this book. The other 2 I didn't really care too much for, or I didn't really like relate to or find as entertaining or intriguing, but maybe I just wasn't interested in the character that she was talking about or like the life lessons that she learned through those characters. But I feel like everyone can kind of reap a little bit of benefit from reading this book in one form or another. In terms of writing, 5 out of 5 for sure, but I will say I didn't like connect to any of the characters necessarily. I found a lot of the writing and the quotes in here to be relatable, but beyond that, I don't think I'll be thinking about this book moving forward necessarily. The themes of this book and the impact of the messaging is very strong, but besides that, I don't think the book itself is memorable. However, I would recommend it. It's such a short read and the writing is beautiful, and I feel like anyone would be able to gain something from reading this book. So with that being said, I think I'm going to rate this book 4 stars. Here are the 2 books that I read for this video. Both of these authors are from Sweden and they do have other books in their backlog. I am especially excited to be able to read Fredrik Backman's other books. I have Beartown on my physical TBR, so I'll probably read that eventually. That pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed this second segment of Around the World in Books. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading outside of YouTube, I typically am updating Goodreads and Fable on a real-time reading basis because that's how I track my books that I'm reading. If you want to connect on Fable and Goodreads, it's always linked in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.